I think most people nowadays would associate Borderlands with the more recent games, Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel, with all of their annoying, obnoxious pop culture and meme references, which is fair enough as those are the games most prominent in people's minds. But I think few would remember the first Borderlands game. In essence, it's a stripped back version of what the series has become, with very little self-awareness, quite difficult and brutal combat, and a great rich game mode to explore on foot or in vehicles, solo or cooperatively online. Released in 2009 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, Borderlands was at the time a really unique and enjoyable RPG/ first-person shooter, and one that still largely holds up 6 years down the track. Set on the hostile planet of Pandora, you assume the role of a Vault Hunter, which are treasure seekers who have come to the planet to seek out the Vault, a mysterious, ancient crypt rumoured to hold immense treasures. Along the way, you're guided by a mysterious voice in your head and the hundreds of claptrap model robots stationed on the planet. Now, Pandora is a dangerous place, held under control by the Atlas Corporation. It was originally home to thousands of convicts used as slave labour, who've now all been let off their leash, so to speak, and have taken up residence throughout the planet, becoming bandits and wreaking havoc on the locals. The planet itself is home to skags, which are like claw-faced wolves that hunt in packs and live underground. Then you've got the Rak, which are flying creatures that also hunt in packs, and lastly various other hostile alien species of bugs that would like nothing more than to see a Vault Hunter on their dinner plate. It's a fascinating setting with a real Mad Max in space vibe and a story that is surprisingly dark and morose at times. All of the characters have these neat little comic book style intros, and overall there's quite a bit of charm to it. I think the claptrap robots are a real standout, and also some of the dialogue from the bandits is pure gold. It's great because no one talks like a 20-something-year-old who browses Reddit, there's no lesbians or bisexuals who feel the need to frequently remind us of their sexual preference, and dialogue is expositional, not used as a means to regurgitate movie quotes or internet slang. Borderlands runs on the Unreal 3 engine and everything has a cel-shaded, almost cartoonish look that's very artistic and appealing. The soundtrack is composed by Jesper Kyd, among other people, and the overall presentation, the music, the sound, the visuals is of a very high standard. Anyway, in the game's opening, you're able to choose from one of the 4 different characters: a soldier, a hunter, a berserker, and a siren. Now, each of these classes has a unique character skill, which is really what differentiates them from one another, aside from some base stats like health. The soldier can drop a turret to help him out in combat, the hunter can send out his pet bird to attack up to 6 enemies, the berserker can go into a rage mode and beat everything up with his fists, and the siren can move to an alternate dimension and come back out of it, dealing elemental damage in the process. These 4 classes alone give the game loads of replayability just straight up, and deciding on how to spend your skill points as you level up is one of the things that makes the game so enjoyable. Though you're free to use any weapon you choose, each class has a couple of weapon specialties which they can excel at with the right skill points. As an example, the soldier can use shotguns and assault rifles, whilst the hunter can buff up his abilities with pistols and sniper rifles. None of the classes really pick up any speed until you hit around level 20 or so and max out a particular skill tree, which means the starting few areas can be a bit boring. There's a lengthy campaign here with dozens and dozens of side missions to complete as well, all of which earn you XP and cash to level up. Level scaling can be a bit off at times. If you deviate from the story too much, you might come back to find yourself over leveled, but this doesn't make it that much less challenging. How well you do in this game is going to come down to one single major factor, and that is how lucky you get with weapon drops. Like any good RPG, you'll come across chests in the game that give you new weapons, all with different degrees of rarity. Pistols, revolvers, shotguns, etc. And whether or not you get your hands on a good weapon is key to your success. Borderlands was always heavily marketed as having hundreds, if not thousands, of guns for players to use, and that's fair enough, but the only issue here is that 90% of the guns you come across are just total trash. They've got low damage, slow firing rates, or really small magazine sizes, and will be more useful propping a door open than killing enemies. The quest rewards are often pretty average as well, so the best weapons generally come from those that you find in the environment. Quite often you'll have to spend a bit of time farming chests to find something half decent. Now, the difference between a good and a bad gun is huge, and it can be a quite tough game initially until you get your hands on one. Certain weapons have elemental effects as well, and these are definitely the ones to look out for. Electric weapons will knock an enemy's shield off in a matter of hits. Fire and acid are like damage over time effects, and lastly you've got an explosive elemental which adds a buff to a weapon's base damage. As an indication of how much a good gun can carry you is the fact that on my hunter I ended up using a revolver with an incendiary buff for a good 10 or 15 levels before I found a replacement. Even then though, the difference was marginal, and it just shows you how much a good weapon can serve. Even still, Borderlands is often quite a difficult game. When you enter an area, there usually spawns a bunch of enemies, bandits, skags, or whatnot, and they will attack you relentlessly. You have a shield that regenerates over time, but your health bar is fixed and will need to be replenished by health kits. When your health is knocked off completely is when you start to bleed out, and if you're able to make a kill in this mode, you're granted a second wind, which puts you back into the game with a full shield and about a quarter or so of your health back. In the later levels, you'll really die a lot no matter how good you are, so you almost have to plan for a second wind by positioning yourself near a weaker enemy, so that when you're finally knocked down, you can make an easy kill and get right back into it. Thankfully, unlike the other games in the series, when you are bleeding out, enemies often stand still right in your line of sight, allowing you to kill them easily, compared to the most recent games where they'd often run away like total pricks. Overall, the difficulty is quite high, but this mechanic makes it seem somewhat fair, mostly. Some of the larger enemies, however, can be a royal pain in the ass, as there's a few of them with unavoidable attacks. I don't mean that like how DSP would say it, they're literally unavoidable, be it, homing projectiles, melee attacks that hone in on the player, or just attacks with a large area of effect. Boss enemies often take a staggering amount of damage before being killed, and you quite often don't have the luxury of a second wind during these moments. This becomes more a matter of waiting for them to reveal a weak point and using the right elemental damage against them. And then once you hit New Game Plus mode, this again all changes as the difficulty gets ramped up even more. In most games, New Game Plus mode is often much easier because you've got all your old skills and weapons from the get-go, but in Borderlands it's actually a much more difficult mode, even with all your existing levels and items. You will get better loot and be able to level up to the cap, but enemies are tougher and stronger, and they're able to take you down much faster to the point that you will go from full health and shield to bleeding out in the blink of an eye. This is really the biggest problem with Borderlands on the whole, and that's the balancing in general, and it's the kind of thing that separates good RPGs from the rest. The best indicator of this is how much less effective the player skills become in New Game Plus mode, which is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. Brick, as an example, has his Berserker Rage mode, where he runs around screaming and punching things for massive damage, but even when you spec to this ability, you just drop like a bag of dirt from the most basic enemies in the game, because the damage they dish out is just monumental. This has been a huge issue in the entire series, and I know it tries to sell itself off as some sort of, hardcore game like death is part of the experience, and that's all well and good, but what this ends up doing is forcing the player to choose a very particular build to maximize survivability, which just kind of saps all the fun out of it. After finishing the main campaign twice, if not just once, then you're able to also mess around with the DLC, for which Borderlands has 4. Now these are the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned, Mad Moxie's Underdome Riot, the Secret Armory of General Knox, and Claptrap's Robot Revolution. Now these are all pretty damn good value. The only one I really don't like is the Underdome, simply because Moxie is irritating as a character. The Armory of General Knox and the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned are probably my favourite. The Zombie Island is great because it's quite a departure in tone from the others and has some enjoyable side quests, and General Knox is also great as it's easily the biggest in size out of all 4, and the eponymous armory you access at the end of it has some of the best weaponry in the entire game. I don't think you can even get Borderlands without these DLC being included anymore, so even if you don't want to play them, you'll still get them anyway. They're obviously not of the same quality as the main game, and they don't scale with the level of the player, meaning you'll have to forego the campaign to play them, which is a bit irritating, but they're fun enough for the most part. Lastly on that note, let's break down the amount of value you're getting with all of this. To finish the main campaign on a first time playthrough, I think would take anywhere from 15 to 20 hours. Then you're also able to play through it again in New Game Plus, so for one character, you're looking at upwards of 40 hours. Now we've got 4 characters, so that's essentially 120 hours of gameplay. Then we can also consider each of the DLC, which clocks anywhere from 3 to 5 hours or so each. Again, with each character, that's another 20 or so hours of gameplay you're getting. On top of all of this, we haven't even considered people just grinding and playing with friends for the hell of it, so let's say that's another 10 or so hours times 4 for each character. Rounding it all up, you're looking at easily 200 hours of gameplay, which is just incredibly good value. The price is still a little bit high for my taste though. I think Steam is charging like $40 for it, which is bullshit considering it's a 6-year-old game. But if you do get your hands on it for cheap, then a good time is definitely assured. And if you've got a friend to play with, then expect that to be a cracking good time. At the end of the day, Borderlands is still a largely enjoyable game without all the bullshit politics that has infested the gaming industry of late. It's violent, cheesy, comical, and damn good fun. Worth playing for anyone who likes killing things and shooting big guns.
Another